Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And last week saw the launch of the Korean localization for EVE Online, or for the client at least. So that's going to be interesting to see how this new player base is going to work on TQ. I think, if I'm not mistaken, South Korea is known for having a very strong gaming culture. They're also pretty hardcore, a grindy society, I think, with quite long hours generally, so they're used to working hard. I wonder if a sandbox game like EVE Online might be something that at least finds a strong niche in that culture. It might just be, so we'll have to wait and see. And something else that I noticed over the last week is quite a few Reddit posts on the subreddit from new people that tried the game for the first time. So for me, these are some first signs that CCP's efforts into trying to get new players into the game are starting to bear fruit. Of course, both of these, the Korean localization and CCP's efforts towards the new player experience, are things that'll need at least a couple of months to prove themselves. But I think it's a good idea. There was a certain, or there still is, I should say, a certain sense of stagnation, at least in the high-end end game of EVE Online, and from the bottom up, you need new players if you want to shake things up. So yeah, let's see how all of that works out. As always, we'll take a quick look at the new Eden store as well. No special sales to be seen here. The bundles are still front and center, so it's basically the same as last week. I do generally tend to at least wait for a sale before I jump in on some of my then very favorite cosmetic things. I'm really not someone that spends a lot for cosmetics. There are exceptions, but it is pretty damn rare, which means that we can move on to the market itself pretty swiftly. That's why everyone is here, of course, and we'll start with Plex at 2 minutes and 5 seconds. 205, and you can see this is GTA 4 itself. I took 3.6 million for the sellers, but there are some small sellers that are really going below that price quite heavily. Buyers in GTA are going for 3.4 million, and then if we go to the player owned trade hubs, we are a bit above 3.5 million for the sellers. And on the charts, this is more hesitation with a slight downtrend actually on the 5-day moving average. That is pretty interesting. We're also staying below 3.5 million on the average, which I think is very interesting. If you look at 3.5 plus million in the trade hubs and 3.6 plus million mostly in GTA 4, that means that, well, buyers tend to win out at this point. There's enough people apparently that buy Plex and sell them, or have Plex and sell them directly to these buyers, to make the average price stay below 3.5 million. Pretty interesting. Is this where you should still be investing in Plex? Honestly, I thought we would have started an upswing here in October. You can clearly see that we started pretty close or even below 3.4 million. Can we actually win above 3.5 million? I thought this would have more legs. On the other hand, it is possible that CCP's efforts against botting, and they do keep showing us numbers of, well, that's quite a lot of risk that we're taking out of the economy, might have its impact as well, and their continued increased efforts against botting might be part of the equation here as well. For now, I'm seeing quite a bit of hesitation, and usually during a winter jump up for Plex, it would have started now, which brings us to this full 1 year chart. Of course, look at where we are, look at where we started, 3.25 million, 3.5 million. That definitely looks in line, and here we actually have a May peak, so who knows, perhaps we'll repeat this pattern this year. What might be the cause of that is no fanfest, no expansion, no big high builders, which means that potentially we won't have a winter spike unless a winter war breaks out in EVE Online in Nullsec. We will see. That's of course up to the players, not up to CCP, but here in April with this peak, of course, that is potentially like a fanfest month this year as well. So this might be my new personal horizon when it comes to the Plex movements. There may not be an increase right now for the early winter, because we don't have a winter expansion. We do have the Invasion Part 2, but even now, despite the fact that the Vegas is over, I haven't really seen a lot of hype building or anything like that around the late November release. So we'll have to see how that works out. But I think there's a distinct possibility now that just like last year, basically, we'll have actually a pretty slow and hesitant winter where we stay at the current price range, and that it's only in the next year, as we work our way towards FanFest, as we start to get announcements, maybe devlogs and things like that towards FanFest, that we will actually start to increase in price, which feels kind of crazy, of course, because here April, May, June there was no FanFest, if I'm not mistaken. So why is this price increase here? I can't really tell you exactly what that one was anymore. I don't know by heart, but very interesting situation in my opinion in the Plex chart. And if this happens, then these are still good investments, of course, but it's difficult at this point to know for sure how we are going to move, because as I've said, there's lots of factors at play, and I think that CCP's increased efforts against bots are definitely part of the equation as well, and I'm personally hoping that they do not slow that down, that they really try to stamp that problem out. Next up, we have the multiple pilot train certificates. Bit of the same thing, right? Slow increase as well, tried to peak up above 1.5 billion, but was pretty quickly punished, not on a big volume increase, so basically not on a sale, and that means that multiple pilot train certificates are being sold for just above 1.5 billion. Buyers are coming in just above 1.4 billion, and the average price is back below 1.5 billion. So it's actually again the buyers that are winning out most of the time. You can actually grab multiple pilot train certificates for less than 1.5 billion by putting up a buy order at the moment. Pretty interesting situation. Let's move on to these skill extractors, which should show the same thing, and they do, playing around 400 million is, but look at the tail end here. We were a little bit above that, and then at the end here we're actually going back down to less than 400 million ISK. In fact, sellers are now at 395 to 396 million as well for skill extractors, forced below 400 million ISK. Pretty important actually, and in a substantial fashion as well. Look at that, all of these in the last 24 hours have basically started to compete below 400 million ISK, and the buyers are coming in at 383 million for most of them, one exception at 390. So that's the Plex situation. Basically, I think all of these give you a gauge of what's happening real life currency wise, and I'm seeing a lot of hesitation, and in fact in the last week or so, or last 5 days or so, actually a little bit of downwards pressure, which I personally did not expect. Another part of the market is of course the injectors, which have as a large component the Plex prices as well, but then skill points and speculation on skill points play a big role as well. Here are the large skill injectors, which actually dropped to a pretty low point for less than 800 million ISK. Got a bit of a volume bump out of that, and so I think here speculators started to make their skill injector investments, which is also where I would put my ISK if I were looking for an investment in this category. You could still go for Plex, but I think that with the large skill injectors being this slow, and with the skilling spree still ongoing, all of the SP gifts that we've been given, if that slows down in the next year, then there might be more demand for skill points, and you could just basically get a double whammy. If Plex prices go up towards FanFest, and if demand increases for skill points, we could see a much bigger increase in the injector market. So these large skill injectors are now selling for 821 million, but the buyers have opened up a decent margin, 782 for the first buyer, 775 for most of them, so it should definitely still be possible to grab large skill injectors for less than 800 million ISK. You may have to go aggressive, you may have to get close to 800 million ISK, but I think it is still possible, and that would, in my opinion, be an interesting place to make an investment. Look at the full chart. Most of the year we've been above that price range for sure. We did start with that again as well, and then we have this same pattern as with the Plex chart here, with a nice increase with a peak in May for the skill injectors as well, which, as I've said, the potential here I think is even higher than Plex because of what's happening with skill points at the moment in EVE Online. For the small skill injector, we of course have the same pattern. Look at that lovely May peak up to 210 million ISK. Again, we had the downtrend where we went to less than 160 million ISK. We're now back above that for the sellers, 164.5 0.5 million, but the buyers are still at 153. So again, not that many buyers. Let's take a look at it like this. Yeah, it goes up to 158 though in the trade tower. That's actually something I should check here as well. Goes up to 793. Yeah, as I've said, you're gonna be able to buy large scale injectors for less than 800 million ISK, but you'll have to go aggressive against the perimeter traders. And for the small scale injections, same thing. You'll be able to buy them for less than 160, but you're competing not in JITA, but you're competing against perimeter and Obanan in the player owned trade hubs for this item as well. And then finally we have the daily alpha injectors, which has been focused on very much by CCP apparently when it comes to sales. In fact, in the last 3 days we have another massive boost in volumes, which indicates, in my opinion, another sale. These are now selling for 41 million ISK. Buyers are coming in at 37 million. So this, if you want another one of those investments right now, I would actually say, yeah, daily alpha injectors are pretty interesting as well. Look at the May peak here. That's yet another one that's shown that pattern. And right now we're actually talking not just speculation on skill point demand for alpha clones, but also this is obviously a CCP intervention with sales on the daily alpha injectors that have caused this price crash to pretty much a 1-year low point at this time. So that's kind of an interesting situation, of course, but you are also gambling a little bit on FanFest bringing the hype, and on FanFest for next year actually having that impact on the prices. I think historically that does tend to work out, but who knows what happens this winter, of course. Next up, the mineral market coming in at 11.25. Let's take a look at this. You may already have seen from the ticker that Tritanium has had to give back some of those gains. Went back up to 6 ISK and is now working its way back down to 5.5. Yeah, in fact 5.4 ISK for sellers around JITA, 5.45 for the lowest seller in JITA itself, 5.11 for the buyers. So that's pretty narrow margin. Buyers have been forced up to 5 ISK, which is good news in my opinion. That means that Tritanium should be able to defend that price range pretty well, but you don't have a lot of extra from there. You can see the volumes here as well: 1.6 billion, 2 billion units, another billion units, another billion units down here. People are still dumping Tritanium, being able to sell above 5 ISK. They're pretty damn happy with that. So this is going to be a little bit of pressure. Then my personal expectation is that we continue this seesaw movement bouncing off of the 5 ISK. As the closer we get to there, sellers are going to say, all right, time to hold off. We might see another price spike, and then we'll get that filled very quickly yet again. So that's the situation for Tritanium. The closer to 5 ISK you are, I think the worse off, of course. But historically speaking, as long as we stay above 5, which here was a bit of a problem, of course, in the first half of the year, the better it is. That's not so bad for Tritanium. Of course, 6 ISK is great, nice average. 7 ISK is really good. Then we've got Pyrite next. All right, surprise climb up to 5.5 basically, but also at the tail end giving back some of those gains, now selling for just shy of 5 ISK, and then buyers coming in at 486. Again, a complete closing of the margin by sellers. 1 billion units, 300 million units, 300 million units here. All of that competing with each other from 526 down to 497. It's basically supply that has come in, trying to take advantage of these exceptionally high prices, if you look at this 1-year chart, that are driving this price down. So this is actually a natural response, I think, to the price increases. On the other hand, in the upcoming weeks, I think what we're gonna have to keep an eye out for is complete oversupply, and basically the buyers having the luxury of going down, down, down again. That would be very dangerous. But for now, it's basically just a margin between sellers and buyers that has gone down because of extra supply. So if they then decide, all right, it's below 5 ISK, I'm not gonna bring more pyrite to the market, give that a little bit of breathing room for the price to make its way back above 5 ISK in a substantial way, then we'll see new supply again. And as long as we can keep the buyers in the current range, I feel like this is actually looking pretty decent for minerals. For Mexalon, so those that were doing really well in the first half of the year, it's a completely different story. We are yet again below 40 ISK on average, which is historically and for this 1 year very, very low. 38.64 for the first seller, 37 ISK for the buyer. So that margin has also closed. The market is not willing to go that much lower than like 35 ISK, but obviously a 1-year low point. Mexlon is in a pretty bad spot. I personally would hoard it at this point. Then we've got Isogen, and that's also not doing great. The most oversupplied mineral in the game at the moment. I think this stuff used to be worth 150 to 200 ISK pretty easily. Was worth more than Mexlon by a mile. Pyrite, titanium, not even close, and to see this at less than 15 ISK is quite disheartening. We're talking 13.15 ISK for the sellers, and we are talking 12.87, less than 13 ISK for the buyers. Also narrow margin, so the market is, I think, deciding that 13 ISK seems to be the bottom range for Isogen for now, but definitely the biggest victim of all the changes that have been brought in the last couple of years to mining, to moon mining as well. Then we've got the mineral compositions in nullsec. All of that stuff has led to a massive crash of Isogen value. Basically, it's too easy to produce this for the mineral mix that is generally needed for industry in EVE Online at the moment. Is this then a massive opportunity? If you expect CCP to at some point intervene in this situation, yes, but that's the gamble that you're taking, basically. I'm still of the idea that if CCP wants a lot of fresh blood, they also want people to not feel too bad about losing ships. Making Tick 1 ships super easy, available and cheap might just be part of the strategy. Next up, we have the Noxium market, also one that did decently well to defend 300 ISK for most of the year. And then at the end here, we have that breaking down, which happened basically during the blackout. And so one of my theories here, at least I think part of the explanation, is going to be that the blackout forced people out of the belts, out of the anomalies in nullsec, and so if they still wanted to do mining, that actually incentivized them to go very hard on moon mining, which also gave them the ability to decide on their own mineral mixes, because you can choose the moons that yield certain results. For instance, a moon with lots of Noxium or a moon with lots of Mexlon, and since these two have been able to defend their price, it's actually normal that they're going for more of these rather than anything else that's so low in value. And on top of that, Mexlon was always a bottleneck in nullsec production, local production of minerals, and so an increased focus on both of these is, in my opinion, part of why this price has crashed down by quite a bit, down to less than 250, 235 for the sellers and 212 for the buyers. Then we have our former nullsec minerals like Zydrine, which tried to get back to 500 ISK but is already falling back down. 480 for the sellers, 451 for the buyers. And are we still seeing that pattern? Yeah, 1.5 million, 1.4 million, a million here, a couple 100,000 here, 2 million here. This is just the new nature of Zydrine and Megasite. It's being moon mined in the 0.5 systems, and you get, you know, individual moons, corporations that just blow up a chunk, moon everything, and bring their Zydrine or Megasite production straight to the markets, competing with everyone else. So you've got a very narrow margin, you've got a lot of sell orders, and they're all competing very close with each other to the price. Just, I want that ISK, so we're bringing that straight to the market on a maybe weekly, daily, bi-weekly basis. It really depends on the moon, but I think that's basically what's happening here. A lot of this supply that's driving down the price, look at Megasite, 1-year low point here, is just coming straight from all of these active moons. 345 for the sellers, 321 for the buyers. Megasite used to be the most expensive mineral outside of Morphite, so this is kind of a crazy situation as well. You can see this here again. All of this is in the last 24 hours. 3 million, 2 million, 2 million, another 1.5, another 2.5, and that's just, you know, production of the day, the week, whatever it is, and they're all competing with each other. So just in 24 hours this goes down from 345 to 344, and it just, you know, as you go down here, it keeps going like that, with a lot of sell orders. And then finally we have that exception. Here is Morphite, which is continuing to go down, but had a very strong summer, working its way up to almost 13,000 ISK. At some point, of course, that niche gets filled, that opportunity gets filled, and I think that that's what we're seeing here, just more supply in Morphite. 11,000 for the sellers, 10,000 for the buyers, still a very good price. The low end is 7,500 ISK on the chart, so keep that in mind as well. And part of it may just be that Morphite is also a component in the production of those triglavian implants, which I've gotten started on myself, so I had to buy some of that expensive Morphite in order to get working on my own set. And yeah, it's just going down in price now, as I think supply find their way to those higher prices again as well. Next up, the PI market coming in at 20 minutes. Let's take a look at those. The general vibe here has been for me that we are slowly recovering from a September fall slump, which I had expected to happen in the summer. It generally is during the summer that activity decreases. If there's one activity that tends to hold up very strongly, it is PI, because it is so passive. Just log in, put up your extractors, and then maybe once a week, once a month, whatever it is, bring your stuff to the market. That tends to hold up quite well, so I thought with lower activity through the summer we would see a summer slump in this, as we had less demand but maintained supplies. Unfortunately, the blackout experiment and the skilling spree, I think, threw a wrench in that plan. As a result, we actually have an August slight peak here, and then it's only in September that we had the decline, for instance here in the broadcast nodes. In some of the others you'll see that we declined a lot more, to well below average, and I think in the last couple of weeks we're slowly starting to recover, but we're basically still going to see if we finally get back to an average price. For broadcast nodes, a bit of a different story. In October went actually up to an above average price and is now landing on 2 million. So on the chart we're on an average 2 million, but then look at the new sellers here. 1.9 million for the first one, and then it's 2 million for most. 1.8 million for the buyers though. So sellers are on average, buyers are a bit below average. Construction blocks showing exactly what I was talking about. September decline, October fallout, and then here we're slowly trying to get back to that 10,000 ISK. We're not there yet though. 10,000 for the sellers, 9,400 for the buyers. Still a bit below average, but slowly we're crawling our way back to that 11k average range. Then we've got consumer electronics actually continuing the decline here through November. That's very interesting. Look at these data points, getting as low as 10,000 ISK on average prices. That's very low. We're talking 12,000 for the sellers, but 10,300 for the buyers. So slight recovery from that real bottom, but we're quite a ways away from like 12,500 average. Well, actually it's only 500 ISK, so it is a big margin between sellers and buyers that is starting to open up. This could move very quickly again towards that average trade range, but we're still below that, still trying to recover. Fuel related PI materials like coolants has been in a rather different situation, actually doing very well, and with a late October peak up to 14,000 ISK that was declining, actually repeated right now. 14,300 for the sellers, 12,500 for the buyers, well above average. Great time to sell your coolants. I have 2 coolant planets myself, very easy to produce. Gas planets is all you need, so time to sell. This is a great price for coolants right now. Enriched uranium holding on to 14,000 ISK, not bad. Again, lovely September peak. This is tied to fuel production as well. 14,300 for the sellers and 12,200 for the buyers is very nice. Integrity response drones, these are staying below average. You do have some data points that are trying to get back up a little bit, but we're definitely still trading quite low. Sellers are coming in at just above 2.2 million. Buyers are at just below 2.2 million, at least one of them. Yeah, most of them actually here in the Tranquility Trade Tower coming in at that range as well. Yeah, it's a little bit below average at this point. And fresh supplies. Yeah, look at that, full front page in the last 24 hours. There's basically a bit of oversupply in these that is causing that price to stay below average. Mechanical parts, try to make right this one, despite being tied to fuels. did note the same pattern. You can see decline in August, but decline in September and October, where we're really working on below average prices, less than 10,000 disc on some days. Here was the recovery up to 11,000 disc, but it is not to stay. Still 11k almost for the sellers, but 9,000 disc for the buyers. Basically a bit of lack of demand that is causing the average prices to crash back to well below average. Nuclear reactors, little peak here in September, but then the decline just going straight through September and October to a less than average price here as well. Nuclear reactors though, a terrible market volume wise, so very difficult to actually trade in. 86,000 for the sellers, 76,500 for the buyers. Is still trading very low, but even if you buy some or a lot of nuclear reactors at this price, it's going to be very difficult to actually sell at, let's say, above 100,000 disc. But just look at when the price is at this range, look at the volumes just completely disappear, and then you actually have a volume spike starting this decline, which means just massive dumping, massive supplies trying to take advantage of that price. So trading in nuclear reactors very difficult. The volatility is nice, but it needs to see higher volumes before I would say, okay, let's take advantage of this less than 80k buy price. Next up, we get the organic mortar applicators. You can clearly see 1.1 million, a bit below that, should be around the average. We're almost there, a bit below 1.1 million for the sellers, but less than a million for the buyers. So we're clearly trading still below average. Then we get the robotics tied to fuels. Actually a very difficult September and October as well. Here's that recovery, tries to get back to 95,000, but we're actually going back down in the last week as well. 93,000 for the sellers and 88,000 for the buyers. Interesting, I thought we would continue the recovery, but we are obviously not. Self-harmonizing power cores also back to less than average. 2 million for the first seller, a bit above that for most. 1.8 million for the buyers. If we look at that on the chart, that's definitely pretty low yet again. So it's a lack of demand, or buyers demanding lower prices and just not willing to budge from their current price ranges. Superconductors, a bit more the pattern that I expected, right? Decently holding on in August, then in September, nope, not working out. 10,000 disc September, October. Finally the recovery at the tail end, slight jump up, but we're still not at the 12.5k. 11,600 for the sellers, less than 10,000 disc for the buyers, still below average. Then we have the test cultures that are actually surprisingly going back to an above average price here. Although historically speaking, this is still a terrible price for test cultures. We've just had such a rough year where you could have, for most of the middle of the year here, April, May, and then even the summer, you could have bought this stuff for like 6,000 disc pretty easily. It's now selling for 8,500. A lot of them though coming in at 10,000 disc, and then you get buyers at 8,400. So that one is going up in price all of a sudden. Very nice wavy movement though, with May, June here, the opposite of Plex. Keep that in mind, the exact opposite of the Plex increase being bottom prices. And even here through the summer, you had opportunities to grab this at 6,000 disc. Would have been a nice profit, I think, if you can sell it for 10k at this point. And volume wise, look at that, increased volumes. That's a lot healthier than these nuclear reactors. And then finally we have wetware mainframes, which is exactly what I was talking about early on. Look at how well it held on to 2.1 million over the summer, surprisingly well. Then in September just couldn't hack it anymore, went down to less than 2 million ISK for most of the month, including the first half of October. And then finally we have the recovery, and now we are talking 2.2 million, a bit below that for most sellers, just shy of 2 million for the buyers. That is the normal trade situation for wetware mainframes. So most of them though hesitating, actually showing signs of more pressure, a bit of lack of demand basically in the PI market at the moment. So the full recovery is definitely not here yet. Next up, advanced moon materials coming in at 2820. These have been struggling with some surprisingly tough remainders that basically stayed above average here. So let's start with crystalline carbonites, which I think was one that was struggling, but then had this surprise spike, indeed stayed above 150. But you can see though the peaks are going down, and then we're basically gonna land towards 140 at this point. 158, 157 still for the sellers, not bad. excuse me, this is a surprise. 156 for the buyers. So basically forced up in this range as well. Okay, that is definitely a big surprise to see these buyers here being this aggressive. Good news then for crystalline carbonate. 156, right around average. And the buyers have actually been forced up for some reason, at least some of them right here, but still 38 million, 50 million units, that is not bad. So that's a nice increased price, nice defense for crystalline carbonates there. Next up we have the Fernite carbide that is not holding on so well. You can see though that the decline started here in mid-October already, went through the 137 and is now landing at 125. Less than that for the sellers and just above 124 for the buyers. Yeah, 1 year low point pretty much. If you want to grab some of these advanced wood materials, this is a juicy chart to get started on. Then we have titanium carbide, which is also under pressure, but not yet at those 1 year low points in my opinion. 175. Mark is trying to defend that. 180 for the sellers, 176 for the buyers. So that's the real question, of course. This one is a very big surprise that basically is indicating that it's not uniformly going to be declining prices in this category. So wait and see for titanium carbide. This could still bounce up as well, just like it did for crystalline carbonates. If not, then of course wait for us to hit this 160 range again, and that's when you can start investing. Tungsten carbide also hesitating well below average, but not willing to break through that 175 barrier just yet. 180 for the sellers, 172 for the buyers though. This one is potentially going down as well. So I'm still not sure. This one is definitely a surprise at the moment. Next up we have our metamaterials. Here are the photonic metamaterials back under pressure, but also not yet willing to really break through the 16,000 disc barrier. 16,500 for the seller, 16,000 for the buyer. So not willing to just go to 1 year low point just yet. Plasmonic metamaterials, then there always has to be a surprise. You'd think it would start to at least land at 20,000 disc to a slightly below average price. No, actually goes back up. We're talking 23,300 for the sellers, 21,100 for the buyers, back to an above average sell price for sure. So it is not a one-sided picture. Next up we've got the non-linear materials, which are also going back up from a low point though. 20,000, look at the volumes here, driving the price back up. How close to 25 are we though? Sellers at 23,500, buyers at 22,600. Below average for sure, but a bit of a recovery already from a low point as well. So there's definitely interest in the market here. And then Terra metamaterials, this was to be expected. Yeah, this was clearly 1 year low point, went below 20,000 disc. It's already being filled back up, but then unlike some of the others that are recovery, we're staying well away from the average price. 20,500 for the sellers, 20,000 for the buyers. It's basically still at this well below average 1 year low point range of around 20,000 disc now. So a mixed picture here for sure. Let's take a look at the other advanced materials to see if maybe we can find a pattern there, but no, fermionic condensates went to a low point, some investments, and is now back to 90k. A little bit below that for the sellers, a little bit below that for the buyers as well. Super narrow margin here. So to my surprise, slightly below average, but not continuing to decline. Ferrogel is different though. 1 year low point breaks through the 40,000 ISK barrier, less than that for the sellers and 38,000 for the buyers. Another one that is obviously well below the entire chart. So if you want to spend some ISK, if you want to gamble a little bit on the advanced wood material category, this one looks like a no-brainer. Now we get fullerenes that show a different picture, right? For a lot of the summer here, they were below 1,000 disc and slowly declining. Bit of volatility, and we're actually selling for 1,000 disc. Buyers at 995, margin is gone, and this is actually a normal, okay price that the market seems to be able to defend. Hypersynaptic fibers went to a low point, slightly recovering. How close to 12k? 11,700 for the sellers, 11,200 for the buyers. So below average, but also recovering in the last week or so. Nano transistors, all right, this one was bound to happen. The one advanced wood material, nano transistors, that due to complete lack of supply actually maintained a 1 year low, 1 year high price of around 6,000 disc for the first half of August, full September, full October, and actually peaked in November to almost 6,500 discs. That was not going to remain. Of course, someone was going to take advantage of that, and I will not even that much of volume going back to the average 5,000 disc here. 5,000 for the sellers, 4,700 for the buyers. You can clearly see that the supply started to come in. 6,000, 5,800, 5,700, and it goes very quickly to 5,000 disc. That's where the competition is at. So extremely great summer for nano transistors, for the producers of these, but it wasn't a complete lack of supply, and now we've normalized in a matter of maybe 10 days or so. Phenolic composites struggling, obviously struggling here, well below average, 17.5. Less than that for the sellers, 17.20 for the buyers. Super narrow margin, but at a well below average range. And then we still have these ceramic fibers that are also hitting a 1-year low point. 370 for the sellers, 360 for the buyers. Well below average as well. So the most obvious trend right now is that we have increased supplies, which are putting pressures on the prices, but some of them are then surprisingly holding on, recovering, going back above average. So it's still not just a uniformly bad market right now for the sellers. Some investment opportunities. Definitely an interesting segment this week here. Might even look into some of these myself, because a chart like that looks like it is full of potential to me. Next up, the Tech 2 ships coming in at 35.40. So these have been struggling, especially the stealth bombers. I've invested in all of them at 22 million, and in fact the hounds have also all triggered, so I have my stealth bomber investments. And then the cruisers, the logistics cruisers, were pretty low in price as well. Let's see if the trend continues. The Ares actually went up to above 25 million again, 27.5, but is now already slowly declining. So we should see more supplies from 28 million in fact for the sellers, down to 27. Buyers are 25.7. So not yet at a 1-year low point, but the pressure is still pretty obvious in this first Tech 2 ship. Then the Basilisk went to 1-year low point, and finally the investors made their moves. You can see the increased volumes driving the sell price back to 220 million ISK. Buyers though still at 177. So it just means that right now it's trickier to grab these low-end prices, but it can still happen. You can still go for like 175. That's an incredibly low price for a Basilisk, for instance. It's just a lot harder because the investors have made their move on that 1-year low point. This was bound to happen, of course. Cerberus staying below average, but staying above 230, so that's quite decent. 238 for the sellers, 215 for the buyers. That's actually okay, not really a buy opportunity or anything like that either. The Crow doing quite okay as well, just shy of 30 million for the sellers, 26.6, a bit of a lack of demand in the Crow, but considering that, we're still at a pretty good average price. Then the Guardian also, investors started to come in. Of course, we were at 200 million on average price. The buyers were actually quite a bit below that. Look at the volumes, price back to 250. In fact, someone cleaned this out, it seems. You do have some in Perimeter Trade Tower coming in at 212, but in JITA itself it's 300 million ISK for the Guardians. Buyers have been forced up to 200 million. Actually, is that forced up? 200 million is not that high, so buyers are patient. They're willing to not drive the price up all of a sudden. So an investment in the last couple of weeks can potentially already yield a nice result, but I think you'll be competed down very quickly at the moment. This must have just happened for the Guardian market, but investors made their moves on these opportunities. Heretic and Interdictor, this looks like a great chart, but look at the full 1 year, struggling since forever, no volatility worth that name visible in this chart. It's just not in the meta. 66 million for the sellers, 60 million still for the buyers. You've been able to buy Heretics for that price for most of since the summer basically, and even before that as well. So it's a struggling market to create value. Then the Hound, this was my 22 million investment, is now selling for 24.7. Buyers though at 20 million ISK. So you can definitely follow along if you think stealth bombers at some point will recover. And I think even on a medium level conflict in nullsec, stealth bomber fleets will be used, lost, and then need to be replaced. I think that this is potentially a very good investment, and you can go even below mine at this point with 20 million on the buyers. Look at that, below the entire chart, potential upswing in the last year, 40 million, 100% profit. Sounds pretty good to me, so I made my move on these, and I leave it up to everyone else to decide for themselves, of course. The Ishtar had a pretty good September, October here, up to 250. We're going back down though to 33 for the sellers, 210 for the buyers. It's still an okay, slightly below average I think for the buyers, but still an okay price for the Ishtar. Manticore bought those for 22 as well I think, and look at that, buyers at 21 million, sellers at 24 million. Continued pressure in the stealth bomber market yet again. I bought on this dip, so you have a second one potentially if you still want in on the stealth bomber gamble. Munin, that looks interesting for right now. Look at that, playing with the 1 year low point, getting close to 200 million on the chart. It's 212, less than that for the sellers, 191 for the buyers. If you want to ride the Munin train, which goes up to 280, yeah, you can buy for less than 200 million right now. Sounds pretty interesting as well. Nemesis next, still slow decline as well, right? Got back above 25 million, declined very quickly back below that, and you can see the pressure built here as well. We're talking 24 million for the sellers, 22.5 million for the buyers, so you can't match my 22 million purchase just yet, but you can get very close. The Oneros, that's slightly below 200 million, 200 for the sellers, 170 for the buyers. There's definitely this, either it's a complete lack of demand, or it is that the buyers are pretty savvy about the Tech 2 market and they're going like, we're gonna keep that margin open because there is too much supply, there's not enough destruction. At some point this is going down and this will trigger, which is why my 22 million buy orders, which historically speaking for some of these stealth bombers, especially stuff like the Manticore, right, a 22 million buy order when you look at this chart looks kind of crazy, but it triggered. And so that is just a vibe since after the blackout, since after the summer though. You don't have a lot of destruction, you do still have a lot of supplies, and from time to time that oversupply just catches up to all of those buyers. It all triggers and you get your investments done. So it can happen. The Purifier, same thing, definitely struggling. Got back to 25 million, in fact 26 million and 27.5 million for the sellers, but still at 22 million for those buyers. They're still not gonna move, and this is also the range that I bought my stealth bombers at. Saber Interdictor, okay, we do have a price spike, but after reaching a 1 year low point of 62.5 million on the chart. But let's take a look at what's actually happening. Supplies are basically drying up here, nothing new to sell, so we went up to 72 million on just some purchases. Buyers are at 62 million ISK. That's a 10 million ISK margin on a 70 million sell price, 60 million buy price. That's actually a super high margin. So this is basically some Saber buying, but straight from these sell prices. So they've driven those sell prices back up, but I think if any supply comes in, and that's what I suspect will happen very quickly, by next week I think we'll be back down well below 70 million for these sellers. Fresh supply driving all of that back down, and those buyers, they're still there to grab those super cheap 62 million ISK Sabers. Scimitar also struggling below average, 200 million, 216 for the sellers, 217 actually for the sellers, but it's that same thing. Buyers are at 186.6 million, which is, if you look at this chart, let's try to get 180. It's gonna be down here somewhere, and they're just not budging. They're saying, well, if you guys in nullsec don't make any moves there, there's no reason for us to demand any higher prices for these Tech 2 ships. Stilettos at 30 million, quite respectable. Of course, it is an interceptor. Just below that for the sellers, 26 million for the buyers. Those are still doing okay, and that's my brother. He'll have to wait. We're almost done here. Tech 3 ships coming in next at 43.40. like that. And last week we saw the specter of oversupply start to show up. Let's see if it's continuing. The confessor back under pressure, going below 35 million, 35.8 for the sellers, 31.6 for the buyers, and then 30.25. It's not that bad anymore, but the fact that you get 106.55 and 22 here at less than 36 million is going to continue to put pressure on the price. So in the last 24 hours, in the last couple of days, not that bad, but it's every single day that there's still ships coming in competing with these sell prices, continuing the pressure. Yeah, still a slight sign of oversupply for, let's keep it in mind as well, the confessor being at a 1-year low point trade range. Next up we've got the Hecate, same thing, right? Pressure, 1-year low point, going below 40 million is all of a sudden, 39 million for the sellers, 35.7 for the buyers, and this is what I was starting to be afraid of. Last 24 hours, almost a full front page, 148, 94, 39, 65. That's too much. The market cannot handle that. This is going to decline as well. Why is all of this production here? Well, it's still 39 million compared to 36, less than that for the confessor. So it's obviously normal that you're gonna try to make Hecates and try and sell them at a better price. But the vibe is clear, we're oversupplying. Next up, we've got the Jackdaw. Look at that, since October, also very close to 1-year low point, 36.5 for the sellers, 34 million for the first buyer, and supply wise here, that is at least not that bad, but 50, 19, 27, 20, 16, it's still a lot. This is not that bad though, but keep in mind where one of the I think most popular Tech 3 destroyers, the Jackdaw, with its missiles, shields, its versatility, it's an incredible ship. It's going for like less than 35 million on the buy prices, 36.5. That's not even that big a margin. If you think that this is going to be a bottom formation for some reason, then I think you will start to invest in these at this point already. And then we've got the Zwepel, which went to a low point of 32.5 million, recovering a little bit from that, 36 million for the sellers, 32 million for the buyers, though that is pretty low. And as a result, you immediately have 51 of them coming in as well, with competition starting here. So in the destroyer market, there's still oversupply. I'm at least not seeing it escalate, but keep in mind, yeah, 1-year low point reached just a couple of weeks ago. 1-year low points, 1-year low points, 1-year low point. Yeah, it's kind of normal that it's not going to, well, if it were to escalate even further, then of course we're gonna get into no-brainer buy territories at that point. But it is a struggling market after a very strong year, I would say, where we had a very healthy supply, and where you can see here, for instance, we get some lovely price spikes. And then what we should see is that, for instance, here, look at that Jackdaw high price, then starts to decline. So we have basically oversupply because of the higher prices here, almost 50 million ISK. And then if you look at the other one, the Hecate, then it starts to suffer in that period because it was oversupplied. And so as the Jackdaw goes down, the Hecate goes back up in price, because of course there was only enough supply to go around for the market. That was in a very nice healthy situation, and so you can see these two basically communicate with each other. All right, Jackdaw is high in price, we're producing more and more and more and more. Well, because we're producing more of these, we can't make as many Hecates. That one goes back up in price, and that dynamic unfortunately is now over. We're oversupplied across the board. We're at 1-year low points. This could be a nice investment opportunity. I personally am going to wait for buy prices to get closer to, or maybe even break 30 million ISK. I'm willing to wait at this point and see if this oversupply situation continues. Why? Well, if you look at the ticker, you already know that all the cruisers are also struggling, although the Legion just coming back. So the Tengu was even lower. The Legion went to a low point of 130, recovering a little bit from that, 146 now for the sellers, 136 for the buyers. And look at the volume increase. That's definitely investors taking their positions. Then we've got the Loki, same thing, 1-year low point, volume increases. You don't need that many, of course. The cruisers are doing terribly. 155 now for the sellers, 136 for the buyers. And then we've got the Proteus, slight uptick as well, but staying well below average. 138 for the sellers, 17.6 for the buyers. That is super low. And then, okay, so this is maybe a little bit different, but what I noticed on the ticker, the Tengu is still struggling. Sellers coming in at 138 million, buyers at 127. But supply-wise, yeah, still half a page here. Proteus, half a page, not that much. Loki, almost nothing. Legion, almost nothing. Okay, this makes me change my mind. I thought if everyone had that same pattern, still go from 140 to 138 in the last week on more supply, then it's just still across the board and we can go even lower. But it is pretty obvious in the Proteus, the Loki and the Legion that the market is saying, oh, hold on guys, this might not be that bad of an idea to start buying here, because this will not last forever. And so we do have these turnarounds, especially in the Legion and the Loki. Makes me hesitate a little bit to say that we are going to continue to be oversupplied across the board. I'm willing to wait another week, but if you want to have something, then look at these confessors for less than 32 million ISK. Try to find 32 million on this chart. That's pretty damn good. Hecate is in a similar situation, I think 35.7. Yeah, 35 million is all the way down here. And then I think the Jackdaw going for less than 35 as well is not bad. It's something that you have to decide for yourself, of course, but I can understand if you think that the oversupply situation might just be ending already, because we do have this Legion and this Loki turnaround on some increased volumes, but nothing too crazy. I myself am going to wait a little bit longer. And then we still have the extra product for this week, which I was first going to take a look at some faction frigates, but I decided to actually take a look at something we haven't looked at for a long time, the ice products, coming in at 50-30. And so one of the reasons why I'm doing this is because we have decently good performance in the fuel related PI materials, but we have continuing declining fuel prices. So let's take a look at that. Materials, ice products, there we go. So here's heavy water, and this is the reason why I think heavy water 1 year low point currently selling for 200 ISK, less than that, 190 for the first seller, 194 for most, less than 180 for the buyers of heavy waters. Look at this 1 year chart, starts at 500, ends at 200. If that's your potential, then this looks pretty interesting to start to jump back in. Same speculation though, pretty much as with Plex at this point, is that we have now a winter slump, and that FanFest is going to mean that turnaround with a higher point. Will that happen? Tricky to say. Helium isotopes, different story. Starts at 600, has a strong summer, ends at 600, selling for 590, 618 for most, and 536 for the buyers. Still very abundant and very cheap right now. Hydrogen isotopes went to a 1 year low point here as well, I think. 582 jumps back, 672 for the sellers, 606 for the buyers. A bit of a jump here in hydrogen isotopes at the end, but obviously for most of October trading well below average for less than 600 ISK. Then we've got liquid ozone. That's a different story. I don't think you need that in fuel production, but obviously going for 250 ISK starts the year at like 125 or 140 I should say, is pretty nice 1 year chart. Liquid ozone 267 for the sellers, 251 for the buyers at a high point. If there's something you can sell at this point, it's definitely liquid ozone. And then we get some more isotope, hydrogen isotopes, 1 year low point, 550, just recovering from that, 566, 511 for the buyers. That's pretty cheap as well. Oxygen isotopes, 1 year low point as well, going for less than 600 ISK at this point. Yeah, 580 for the sellers, 531 for the buyers. And finally, we've got strontium that is actually doing really well as well, not tied to fuels. And so a mixed picture basically in the ice products, with some non-fuel related ones doing really well. I mean, Stront for 5,000 ISK, 4,000 ISK is actually a pretty damn good price. It is declining on new supplies, but the margin is pretty close, so this is trading well above average. But then the isotopes, terrible, well below average, 1 year low points. And then heavy water is also struggling. If I'd be looking for an investment, it would be in heavy water, because helium isotopes have been struggling for the whole year basically. except for a stronger summer, but you can clearly see that it's difficult to trade at this with these prices, with these charts. But heavy water though starts at 500, it ends at 200. If you can have an opposite wave in the next year, you could be looking at a good investment here as well. But across the board, ice products tend to be oversupplied. There are some exceptions. I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is CCP changing something. You need Strand for some new reason, if I'm not mistaken. Feel free to post it in the comments if you know. And same with the liquid ozone. It might be the jump gates or something like that. I think it's tied to basically Gnostic consumption that has caused these prices to go up to these 1-year high ranges at this point. So mining, whether it's minerals, whether it's ice products, seems to still be massively oversupplied for the market at the moment. No turnarounds to be seen there. That's gonna be it for this week's ETH Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.